안녕하세요. 혼자 오는 건프리입니다. 요번에 체스트 그리고 언던티드 작가 데이비드 톰슨을 만날 기회가 있었는데요. 이번에 언던티드 신작이 나와가지고 동네 가게에서 데이비드 톰슨이 데모를 해주는 그런 이벤트가 있었는데 저도 거길 가서 톰슨을 만나고 게임을 하고 그 짧게 인터뷰를 해봤습니다. 그렇게 긴 인터뷰는 아닌데요. 재밌게 봐주세요.
Just to give you a background on the Korean side of things, I think this interview I would like to maybe more focus on Undaunted series.
Okay.
Because like 2 weeks ago, a company announced they're gonna release the Battle of Britain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people
Like the
really,
Korean language version
yeah,
of it? Oh,
yeah.
okay, cool. Great.
So they're
Great.
really excited about it.
And
Yeah, so the first Undaunted came out in Korea like a long time ago, but then kind of went on hiatus. Then another company picked up and bring it in Korea with the Battle of Britain.
Okay.
And people are excited for that game, as well as the future of that series in Korea.
Yeah.
Because they maybe get Stalingrad next and maybe
Yeah.
Callisto as well.
yeah, I know. Obviously, with Stalingrad, the amount of translation required is a lot because each player gets their own scenario book, and there's a lot of narrative. Like before each scenario, there's a narrative setup, and even though you only play 15 scenarios in that game, there are like 20-something scenarios. So there's like 26 scenarios for each player with their own narrative. So there's a lot of translation. So I know that's a little bit of a heavier lift, but no, that's great.
Yeah. And one of the contributors in that magazine really wanted to relay this message to you that playing Stalingrad was a lifetime experience.
Oh, that's
like
amazing.
The best experience that you had.
Yeah. It's definitely, I don't play my own games much, right? So like demoing it is usually the only time I ever play my own. Every once in a while with my kids, they'll play them. But very seldom do I play my own things. But with Stalingrad, I think that's the only game that I've designed where I played it significantly after the actual release of it because I wanted to play through the whole campaign myself with the final components.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a different experience for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that being said, let's get to some of the questions that I got
Sure,
prepared.
yeah.
So just about game design, like how do you approach your game design?
It definitely depends on the individual game. Almost everything I do are co-designs. Very seldom, and I haven't really actually done like my own solitaire design in a few years. So it depends on who I'm working with. Oftentimes, the genesis of the idea or the original concept of the idea will come from me. If it comes from me, most likely it'll be based on like a historical event. That's my preference. It's not always, but that's my preference. So in that case, obviously if we're designing a new Undaunted game, it's going to have the Undaunted system. But otherwise, it's all about like researching the topic first and then designing the game around that topic. But if I'm designing it with somebody else, there have been instances where they had an idea, like a core idea they wanted to discuss, and that led to, or turn into a game, and that led to the game. So it just depends on that process, and because I'm a co-designer, it's very much dependent on who I'm working with at the time.
So you've designed a lot of historical main board games. Like how do you incorporate the history and think about historical accuracy in your game?
Yeah, it depends on the game, and it depends on the audience for the game. So it can range. You have some games like as extreme as the game I designed called Resist, which is a solitaire game about the Spanish Maquis after World War II. Extreme. It's inspired by them, but it's not grounded in the history, right? So it doesn't try to like reflect historical accuracy. It's not concerned with that. But there are some historical solo games that I've created that are very much about one very specific event, that are about the actual people in the event. It has their names, it has their likenesses in the game. When it's about something like that's an actual event, I try to be as respectful as possible. That doesn't mean I'm trying to simulate it. It just means that I'm trying to reflect a certain thing that happened in the game, whatever the game's modeling, and I'm trying to be faithful to that specific part of the history. So it really depends. If it's something like Resist or Undaunted, where it's aimed at a broader audience, I'm less concerned about historical accuracy. And if it's more like targeted to our traditional war game audience, it's more about the authentic historical Yeah.
Then for Undaunted, how do you pick the theater?
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Like Africa
Yeah.
was kind of minor, like not
Yeah.
very well known.
Yeah.
So how do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the original Undaunted Normandy, I designed based on the unit. It follows the 30th U.S. 30th Infantry Division, and I picked that one because that's the one that my grandfather was in. So that was very personal to me. After that, before Undaunted Normandy was released, Osprey, the publisher, asked us to make a second one. So before the first one even came out.
No.
So that was interesting because we didn't know how the game would be received. But the only thing they told us was, hey, we want you to pick a different theater with different nationalities. Mm-hmm. And so we could have done Eastern Front or Pacific or whatever, but I wanted to explore a different scale. And so if you're familiar with Undaunted Normandy, it's like platoon level, which means like each counter in the game represents a few people. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to zoom into like a very like almost special forces. Yeah, so like each person is a counter. And so if you're familiar with North Africa, there was the British SAS, which are like special forces, and then there was the Long Range Desert Group, which was what the game is about. And I just thought that was a really interesting topic. And most people would focus on the battle between either the British or the Americans and the Germans. But I thought it would be interesting to bring the Italians in because they're not commonly used in a game. So each Undaunted has its own reason for that theater. Like Stalingrad, we talked about, it is a campaign game, essentially designed as a legacy style game. And so it needed to exist in one specific location for a long period of time. And so setting it in a single city like Stalingrad made a lot of sense. And then Battle of Britain, we just wanted to do something totally different.
Right,
and so like, let's do aerial. Yeah, when you think of aerial battle in World War II, you think of the Battle of Britain, right? So, yeah.
So then, just throughout the Undaunted series, like when you come up with a new game, it's always there's a new mechanic in there, or like totally different, like you said.
Yeah.
Aerial battle for Battle of Britain, campaign for Stalingrad, future.
Yeah.
Was there any challenges in like coming up with something new every time?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, not really, because each one we kind of knew, like, you know, with North Africa, we knew like the scale, and then there was reinforcements that brought in solo and team play and that kind of stuff. Each one we would talk about it and we'd say, okay, what's the new piece to this one? And that would drive everything that came after it, right? And so the one thing about working with Osprey is they're extremely methodical and disciplined with their scheduling. So right now, we know about the future of Undaunted like 3 years ahead of time. So, you know, that's all planned. Like, so this game, it just was released like last week. We stopped the design work on it about 2 years ago, right? So because of that, we always have like a lot of lead time and a lot of planning and really put a lot of forethought into like, what's the next thing? And so whatever that difference that's going to be in the game, that's what leads to the development, to the design of that game. So, you know, a lot of people ask about Pacific instead of, you know, space or whatever. But really, the other important thing is that for Trevor, the co-designer, and I, it's really important for us to experience something different ourselves, because we don't want to just remake the same game over and over and over. It would get old for us. So with sci-fi, it gave us the ability to not only come up with like new mechanics, but just something completely new from a theme and setting perspective, right? So it's important for us to just keep that fresh.
Yeah, so now that you kind of opened up this future, you can go anything. Is there any plan on it?
So yes, there is plan. There are plans, but we can't talk about those plans, unfortunately. Yeah.
Then, do you have your favorite Undaunted?
Oh, that's interesting. So certainly my favorite is Normandy, but like I said, it's about, you know, it's based on my grandfather. Was the first one, very personal. If I had to pick one that was my favorite to play, the one I'm designing right now that I can't talk about is by far my favorite to play. Okay. So I can't talk about that yet. But it's a toss-up between Callisto and probably Battle of Britain. I really like the aerial combat in Battle of Britain. It's very different. It's the most different of all of them. But Callisto, I mean, obviously each game we learn from the games before it, right? So in theory, every game is better than the ones that came before it from just a pure design perspective. I think Callisto does a lot of things like going to boards instead of the tiles allows us to really get into the game fast. And because each board is custom to the scenario, like the art and the design for it is, it's the most tightly integrated of all of those. So I think just playing this one, you know, Callisto is probably the most fun for me. But they're all my babies, and I love them equally. So.
Yeah, so I think I just have one more question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can actually talk about this.
Yeah.
You kind of teased it,
Yeah.
but any game in the works that you can talk about?
Any games of the world? Okay, so well,
Not
next,
just Undaunted, but anything.
right, anything, yeah. So next month, War Story Occupied France comes out. So that is a narrative-driven, kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure style game, but at the point in which, well, first of all, it's more than just choose-your-own-adventure. You're doing a lot of interesting resource management and things like that. But there's also some interesting ways in which we deal with tactical combat. So the easiest thing would have been to have a choose-your-own-adventure game that when tactical combat breaks out, you have this, traditional sort of combat system.
Right.
But
I played it, and you have to choose the positions.
Right.
Equipment.
Yeah. You still have this like positional relevance, but it's still all handled through the narrative of the game, which I really enjoyed working on that. It was designed with Dave Neal, who has worked on games like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. So it was sort of a fusion of the things that we are good at, and we've done a lot before. So that's definitely the next one. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I can talk about. There's a lot of things in the works, but I think that's probably it. I mean, certainly, it's not a surprise to say that there's more Undaunted on the way. So, or stuff in that family.
And you're designing something with your daughter too.
I am designing something with my daughter. I can't talk about that. Okay. It's for a publisher. It's a commission game, but we're just starting on that, and it's something that is a topic that she's really into, and so it was helpful for me that she can do all of the research for it, and it's been exciting working with her on it. Yeah.
All right. Lastly, any words for Korean audiences? Or
Yeah, so just words for the Korean audience, especially for War Chest, but really any of my games there. Just thanks for people being interested in them. That's really awesome, and I think it's like you said. I think this is probably true of a lot of other communities that are smaller, but on average, people are more involved, which is, I think, really cool.
Oh, maybe also advertise Battle of Britain a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the next one that's coming out there.
So it's really cool. Yeah. Like you said, the Battle of Britain's coming out there. So I mentioned this before, and this is true. I think it's by far the most different. I think that there's a lot of World War II aerial combat games. There's a lot of aerial combat games, but I think that the way it handles aerial combat, it definitely focuses on quick gameplay over trying to be simulationist, which that's a choice that every person has to make on their own. But I think it plays fast and fun, and I think it definitely stands out in the series. So I'm super excited to hear that it's coming to the Korean market. That's cool.
All right, then that's about all I have.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.